Good evening, everybody. It's me, the coach, and I'm here with special guest Stephanie Tellis. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing wonderful.
That's good to hear. Now, Stephanie, I was first introduced to you for Trauma Informed Tuesdays. So a little bit from what I know, you're a veteran educator,
Mhm.
cultural practitioner, and a casual rabble rouser. Am I saying that right?
Yes, I like to stir things up just a little bit, just a little bit. So I taught middle school for a little over 10 years.
Mm.
Um, and I loved it. Just in the pandemic, things changed, priorities changed for me, and I made a decision to take care of my health first. I got really sick during that time, so
Mm.
transitioned out, but I still love everything about education and do my best to support those that are still putting in the good work in the classroom.
Oh yeah, of course. So tell me, so what do you do currently for your career? I know you used to have a background in education. You have a lot of experience, but what do you do currently, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I work for an anti-poverty nonprofit doing racial equity work for them, and then I also own my own coaching and consulting business where I work with educators primarily,
Mm.
also with institutions, but primarily with one-on-one with folks to practically implement equity and belonging and inclusion.
Very nice, very nice. So that's actually going to tie into, since you mentioned inclusion, that's going to tie into my first question here. So when it comes to the behavior of a specific student, how important is collaboration? Because I'm a physical education teacher. I collaborate with all the other specialist teachers, art, library, music, and also collaborate with the social workers in the school, and all the different admin. But how important is the collaboration in the school setting?
Oh, incredibly. Especially when you are dealing with students who might be experiencing like ongoing trauma, because how they
Mhm.
show up each day is going to vary. How they show up in the morning may not be how they look before lunch, which might not be how they look in the afternoon. So you're getting different versions of them. And then, especially if you teach middle and high school, where the kids are rotating through different teachers throughout the day, and the subjects then start to matter. Of like, I'm not engaged because I don't care nothing about math, and it got nothing to do with the teacher. I'm not here for this geometry stuff, right? And so
Mhm.
having the we're all dynamic and multifaceted people. So all of us are going to see different versions of that student, which is why it's important to have that collaborations to see if like, is this an off day? Is this the ongoing thing? Is this a situational thing? Is this a chronic thing of whatever is going on, to be able to show up to support that student? Because one person is only going to see one perspective, just like with anything, right?
Mhm.
Diversity of perspective, multiple perspectives are super important in how that child is showing up and who that child chooses to connect with. Sometimes we really want to connect with the child and we are not that child's chosen person, and that's okay. And that's why collaboration is super important. So we can support them in the person that they have chosen, to make that connection with, so that they can get whatever it is that they need in that moment.
Oh yeah, so that's actually the perfect segue into one of my questions. I'm actually going to skip that question and go right to this one. So there's a student who consistently has trouble in their classes,
Mhm.
after receiving behavior interventions, parent meetings, other types of support. A teacher thinks they've done everything they can possibly do. What is the next step for that teacher if they think they exhausted all possible resources?
Well,
Mhm.
I think it depends. Like, there's a lot of variables that's
Mhm.
happening in this, right?
Mhm.
Were the interventions helpful? Were the parent meetings helpful? Remember, I had a parent meeting one time, and it was a
Mhm.
student, and he wasn't a bad kid. He just wasn't applying himself in class, and he had failed
Mhm.
a couple of things. And I gave him some makeup work, and he told his mom that I didn't. And she looked me in my eyes. She's like, "I don't know who to believe." And I had to look at her as like, who stands to gain the most by lying here?
Yeah.
Sometimes, it's an emotional thing with parents and where they're going on and what's going on with their life. And in the same way that sometimes we're not always clear-headed as educators when we step into a situation, sometimes we have to step out of it and pause and recollect ourselves. But I think in the generic advice that I could give is that you should hopefully you have a supportive administration. hopefully you have a supportive team, whether that be grade level or level, and that you all can get together, that collaboration piece to work to give you resources and tools. Oftentimes we focus on the students and what they need, and we often neglect what we need so we can show up as our best selves. Sometimes we think it's the student that's the problem, when sometimes it's actually us. And that doesn't mean that we're bad or, terrible. It just means that this is an area of growth for us, and having that constructive feedback is always incredibly helpful. In my career, there's only been one student that we did not click. I didn't teach him the next year, and that was for the best for him and for me. We just didn't vibe, and there was plenty of conversations with mom. Mom was incredibly supportive. His advisor was incredibly supportive. Administration was incredibly supportive, and we just did our best to get through the end of the year. We looked at each other, and I said, "Hey, you don't vibe with me, I don't vibe with you, and that's okay. But what are we going to do to make sure we can get through the end of the year as successfully as possible?" And so we came up with, I think 3 or 4 things that we could do, and things that I could cue him into doing. And we made it through the year. And that was the success. Sometimes making it is the success.
Oh yeah, my wife actually told me that too. Take a hard look at yourself, and maybe don't take things so personally. Maybe change your approach. Think about what you're doing. Just use the resource that you have. Maybe go to a more experienced teacher, get their input, see if it's happening across the board, or is it just in my class. I've had days like that. Like, is he or she just doing this to me, or let me ask around, or maybe what is it that am I doing something wrong, or is it my approach? And that actually ties into what I have here. What resources do you use for improving reflection and collaboration? Any online resources, books, podcasts that we can utilize?
I'm going to recommend people because they generally have all of those things, a book, a podcast, and all that stuff. Dr. Bettina Love, love her work. Goldie Muhammad is also really good. These are more contemporary educators and philosophers on education. Always Gloria Ladson-Billings. And that, hold on, it just left my mind. It's sitting right on my bookcase. I can look at it and see. Linda Christensen. She writes a lot about joy in education and talking about the purpose of education. I think oftentimes, especially for the older students, we get caught up in content and we forget that we're teaching people, humans. They might be younger humans, but they're still people, and we have to attest to their wholeness instead of just focusing solely on content or assessments and things along those lines. And so where are we implementing joy and making sure that we are enjoying the act of learning versus suffering through the punishment of learning? And so I find those people that I named to be incredibly just helpful in reframing things for me and helping me to draw larger connections, to your point of getting out of my head. And it's not always about me, right? It's not always about all the things that are happening, but they're for me, but these global things that are happening on a much larger scale, and then where my students are showing up and how I can then support them through that process.
Great. Yep. So that's actually, I have to ask you this question. I'm kind of curious here. So if other students see that there's a particular classmate getting extra attention, technology, more support, how can the teacher avoid looking like they're playing favorites for that student, if they're favoring that student over everybody else? You might, for example, if I'm teaching 3rd grade and I'm providing this one particular 3rd grader all this extra attention, all the support because I know they need it. And then the other students are like, well, why does he or she get to do this? Or why are you doing this for her? They might take it the wrong way. But how do I avoid making it look like I'm favoring that student and keeping everybody equal, essentially?
Well, I would say that's part of the problem, is this focus on equality when we need a focus on equity, of getting each person what they need versus everybody getting the same thing. And I would say the first thing is really relationship. If you're not in right relationship with your students, ain't nothing. It doesn't matter. You could win a Pulitzer Prize. I know that's not really a thing for teaching, but technically, or a Grammy, and have the most perfect lesson. But if you're not in right relationship with your students, it's not going to hit and it's not going to work and it's not going to be effective. But if your students know you and they trust you and they know that you would not do anything to cause them harm, especially intentionally, then they'll trust that, okay, that's what they need to do for them. And maybe that's not what I need for me right now, right? Also, answering students' questions as transparently as you can be is also helpful. And I think the other piece that often gets neglected is there are a lot of students that are in our classes that have undiagnosed learning differences. And what is good teaching practice overall, right? So if I had one class where there was a student who had a visual difference and needed extra large font on things. So when I printed their things, their stuff was much larger. Kids understood that, right? That wasn't they're like, oh, we see this, we understand the difference. There's been other times where it's been a much more sensitive topic, such as dyslexia or something along those lines. And I do a lot of differentiated instruction in my class anyway. So there's always different levels of text in articles that I'm printing out. So one might be on grade level, one might be above grade level, one might be below grade level. And they're not always in the same groups. So it's a little bit hard to figure out like what is happening when there's so many things happening and they look a little bit different each day. That differentiation piece, if it's a consistent thing that you do, the kids don't they'll look around and like, oh yeah, everybody kind of gets something different. It's fine. And they go on about their business. And again, circling back, wasn't sure if I was clear. Some of the interventions that we have for students are good for all the students, not just that student that it's slated for. Extra time, things along those lines. When we can afford to give those things to all the students, sometimes it's helpful.
Yeah, that's also a benefit because in PE, if you have to show more support for a student, some students get that. Oh, this student might not be able to throw as far. This student might not be able to shoot unless you teach them this way. And I'm glad, equal doesn't always mean fair. I think you talked about that during your trauma and for Tuesday. Some students just need extra support to, to get to make everything fair. But it doesn't mean you're favoring one student over the other, or that one's better than the other. It's just some students just need extra support. You have to approach them a different way, and if they all benefit from it, great. We're here trying to create that inclusive environment. Yeah. So another question for you. Has there ever been a time when you made a mistake during class and the class reacted rudely toward you? What is your advice for when a teacher gets into that situation? So for me personally, there was a time, maybe I think it was my second year teaching. This is when I was teaching high incident special education. It was a corrective reading class, and I think I said something by mistake, and the whole class kind of made fun of me for it. I'm like, and I kind of got a little annoyed and stressed out about it. I kind of took it a little personally, but then I thought, after I calmed down, okay, and I just went in the next day and just kind of moved on. But how do you react, or what do you do if your entire class or the majority of the class is just being rude to you?
So when you said the questions, I thought about this. It is going to sound slightly arrogant. So I want to put this caveat before it, that my mother was a teacher for over 30 years, and she taught all through every grade level of elementary, special education, gifted kids, everything. So I was able to spend a lot of my childhood basically like learning how to teach from her because I was in a classroom a lot for different things. We never went to the same school, and I'm so grateful for that. But like our school schedules weren't the same. So if I was out, then I would be at school with her. So I saw a lot of things that I didn't realize that I was taking in until they started to come out when I started my own teaching career. So I know that I have that leg up of spending my childhood in my formative years learning how to teach from my mom. I have not had an experience where an entire class or the majority of the class has ever acted rudely. Now, have they gotten out of pocket and done some things like, all right, y'all need to sit down and cut that out, and that's it. But I interpret rude as like, I've asked you to stop and you're being defiant with it. Like that's what I interpret as rude. I want to say that as well. So I've never had an entire class be rude and disrespectful to me. And I am grateful for that as well. But I would say if that is happening, and it would happen in your first couple of years, right? Because there's a whole power dynamic that you have to get over when you first start teaching. Like that was one of the first things I learned the first year was like, I'm not about to get a power struggle with kids. Because at the end of the day, I do have the power, right? So if I am fighting over something I already have, that doesn't make sense. And so and I'm going to be very clear, there have been individual students that have been rude with me. But again, it starts with that relationship. It starts with humanizing yourself with your students. It starts with modeling. You have to remember, students and children are always told that they're wrong. And, what's that old adage, children should be seen and not heard, and all of these things. But when you create a space where they feel seen, heard, and affirmed, and that they feel like they can voice their opinion in the most respectful way that they can, they will rise and they will meet you there, and they will match. And talking about matching energy, the kids will match your energy if you show up consistently, if you show up equitably, if you show up in a way that they know that you truly care about them. And you won't have a whole class. Now you'll have a couple, one or two of them, but you'll usually win the kid's over, and there'll be another kid that will step in and interrupt the situation, or try to, it's always one kid in the background. Would you shut up? She said the directions was on the boards. And I always love that kid because it's like, I didn't say it, but I agree. But yeah, so if you find yourself in that situation, I think it would be important to take a step back and do that reflection piece of what's going on. Is there something going on with you and how you're showing up, and maybe you're not aware of it? And then also have that conversation. We don't apologize enough to kids, which is why as adults, we don't like to be told we're wrong, because we spend our entire childhood being told that we're wrong. We have to sit there and eat it. And we should do, as adults, as educators, we should do more of like, hey, I made a mistake. It means I'm not perfect, and here's how we're going to make it right and move forward. And you're modeling for them how they can move forward from mistakes as well. And just sometimes, I started off in a PACE school where we had to be on the same page every day, all 3 classes, which was a very stringent experience. But when we have time and we can make time to have those hard conversations and to have that reset of saying, hey, like, I didn't show up as my best self. I'm super sorry, you all. How can we make it right? How can I make it right? How can we get back in the right relationship and on the same accord?
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, just being consistent. I remember whenever I started a new school, it always, the kids don't know me. They don't know how, what I'm like, my teaching style is like. I can sometimes have a very intimidating presence. But when you get to know me, yeah, I'm really chilled and laid back. And the students, I know it took a long time for a lot of students to see that, because I stay consistent with it. If student acted up, I talk with them, do these interventions, we get back in there, and it gets better over time. But like you said, just being present, being consistent, and show, okay, if I made a mistake, I own up to it. And like you said, modeling that, I think is very important, because the students will see that and build that connection with them, and you'll have a good rapport. Yeah, I think it definitely helps in the long run. So my next question for you that ties into it: what helps you after having a really hard day? I know for me, I listen to music, I like to write, but what really helps you?
Happy hour.
Hurry up. That too. Yeah, I can agree
You
with that.
said really hard, happy hour.
Oh,
But on a sustainable thing, right? Because that's not
yeah.
sustainably what you can do.
Mm,
Is, to that point, music, having rituals, to the best of your abilities, leaving work at work, which is incredibly hard,
mm,
because you bring that with you, like you're always always working. And so I remember towards my latter years, one of the things that I did was I took my email off my phone.
mm.
I was like, if I can't be at a computer, then I don't need to be doing this work.
Okay.
And so having some clear boundaries and some set guidelines of like, it's 8 o'clock at night, I'm not emailing back and forth with you, this can wait into the morning. And not feeling, I think there's such an urgency in everything we do, because there's so many things that we're trying to address and to mitigate and provide for the students that are in front of us, that we are always going, and we never really have the time to pause and just catch our breath and reset for ourselves. That is super important. I call my mom a lot because she was a teacher, so she understood. My husband is in IT, so sometimes when I would talk to him about the things that were going on, he'd look at me and be like, okay. But I called my mom, who understood, and we were able to commiserate, and she could give me some support and things along those lines. But I would say the biggest piece. It's just when you are triggered, it's hard to remember, the things that calm you down. So if you already have like a routine or a list of like, hey, I know I'm not feeling, when I don't feel good, we know it's hot chocolate, we know it's a blanket, and we know it's my comfort show, or, I go for a run or a walk, or, whatever it is that makes you feel more like your better self and the best version of yourself, having those things kind of already set aside, so that when that crisis happens and you're triggered in that moment, you're not trying to calm yourself down and think of what to do to calm yourself down and try to plan it. So if you already have it, like, hey, we know, we throw on the music, we go to a happy hour, we call our mama, and we go to bed and we try again tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I wish a lot of my students would use those coping skills that you were kind of mentioning. Yeah, I know for me, I look around like in my studio here, and I'm like, I like to write. That's what I talked about, the two books that I wrote. Then I like to, me and my wife, we vent about each other's day. We talk about our day, and we like to vent. Like, oh, we did this, and this. Like, okay, now that's out of our system. So let's go ahead and let's play Super Mario Brothers, and let's go watch a movie or something. And we know we both like to cook together, and that helps out a lot. But when I'm at school, if a student really frustrates me, so what my wife taught me not to do is never to run away or take yourself out of I don't know if that's good or bad, but don't ever take yourself out of the situation. Deal with it in that moment and work things out. I guess it just depends on the scenario, because
Yeah.
sometimes you do need to walk away and calm
Yes.
down, so you don't
Yes.
say something you regret or do
Yes.
something you regret.
Yes.
But I'm like, because I know over my very first teaching job, I know I did some things with a student. I'm like, okay, you're frustrating me. I really need you to do X, Y, and Z, and that really upset her because she wasn't particularly. I felt like she wasn't doing 120% in PE class, and I didn't mean to, but I essentially called her out in the middle of class, and that really upset her. And I vowed to never do that again as a teacher, because I not only did that made her feel, I felt awful afterwards too, and I'm like, I'm never doing that again. Like that one day I had a really hard day, so I literally sat down in my calm down corner, and I just like, cause that's what I literally was holding my squishmallow, and I was just so sweet because that calmed me down. And I'm like, and a lot of my students are doing that too. Whenever they get upset, it seems to help them. But yeah, everything you said, great. I love sometimes you just need to take a break. If happy hour helps, I don't recommend that long term, but hey, if it helps,
So it's
go
not a
for
sustainable thing.
it.
Can't do it every day. That's nothing.
Yeah,
But
of
yeah,
course.
I think
Yeah.
also talking with the kids also helps when you appropriately, right? Like, again, I taught middle schoolers primarily. So, if I was having a bad day, I'd come in, hey guys, I am not feeling like my best self. I'm going to show up the best that I can, but I need you all to give me some grace today. Cause, Miss Tellis ain't, she's here, but she's not here.
Oh yeah, I've had autopilot days. Just what I'm doing morning duty. One day I brought my squishmallow to morning duty, and I just held it while I was letting students off the buses. I'm like, or cars. I'm like, it helps me. I don't know, it works, but there's been some hard days when I've had a rough day, or if there's something happens, I don't want to bring it to work. Like, 'cause even when I'm having a really hard time, I try not to bring that into the classroom. I try to stay focused and be present. And then sometimes you just need a breather. Maybe take a mental health day and then recharge
Yes.
the next day, whatever works.
Yes. Some days it's a study hall class. What we doing today? Y'all gonna have study hall. That's all I got for you today. All right.
Of course. So plugs and promotions. So I want to actually, okay, I think. Can you see this screen?
I can,
All
yes.
right. So this is your website, correct?
It is.
All right. So I was actually very intrigued. I took a look at your website, and I was reading a little bit of your background here, which you talked about earlier, and then I saw a lot of terms that I had never seen. Or so we talked about a rabble rouser. You told me what that was. So driven, holistic vision, consulting. You have a lot of experience in training sessions and creating that environment to foster personal growth and collective empowerment. So your stories what really intrigued me. When you talked about how your mother was an elementary teacher, for 30 years. Um, you talked about like, superheroes get tired, so we talked about having a mental health day, recharging your batteries. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take care of you, you're not going to be 100% for your students.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that collaboration, and then the traumatic experiences, which we actually talked about with Ginger Healy on with a previous episode. Understanding that we all sometimes, a kid comes from a traumatic background. Sometimes the teachers come from
Mm-hmm.
a traumatic background,
Mm-hmm.
and you just gotta think about what you say and do. And sometimes it can be hard in that moment because people don't always think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, but yeah, I think about the learning and healing transformation. Yeah, I was literally reading the entire thing just because I enjoyed it so much. Uh, but for getting in touch with you, if someone wanted to contact you, if they had questions,
Mm-hmm.
or they just wanted to, maybe do a training, is this the best way to contact you?
Yes. And also you can email me directly, is info@stephanietellus.com. But there's also a contact page on there. I am building out the website. You can even text me. The business phone number is there, and I'll respond during work hours, boundaries. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time teaching, and I am grateful for it. And I know that it taught me a plethora of skills. And one of the things that I finally have come to understand is that I don't have to be in the classroom to still be a teacher. And I just love helping others experience the joy of learning, experience the power of healing and transformation and what that all means. I think sometimes we look at things as if they are black and white and very separate, when a lot of our things are very integrated and interrelated and interwoven to each other. And much like I said, you could have the most amazing lesson plan, but if you don't have a relationship with the kids, the lesson plan, it's all connected. And I just really love being able to show up and support others who are showing up to support others. Because sometimes the educators, the healers, the people that are doing the work, we need education and healing and support too. And that is what I really enjoy the most about the work that I do, is being able to support those who do a lot of giving in their jobs.
Yes, of course. Even with my time at this new school, I've learned a lot from a lot of amazing people, and I've got a lot of help. And sometimes I just have to think about, okay, I don't know everything. I'm still constantly learning. I'm still growing in my teaching, and when I get constructive feedback, how can I do this better? Or when I'm in a meeting, like, oh, you did this well, but now maybe you can do X, Y, and Z to improve, or maybe try doing this, or I love always having a goal to work towards, and it keeps keeps my job intriguing, and I like being creative in what I do. And yeah, like you said, I love that I can, even outside the classroom, I can still help a student. I can help someone and still help them grow and transform. And I just love helping other people, and I love that's what you do. I love that you love helping people. I love that you love molding young minds and creating inclusive environment. I just love that, especially in our community. I especially love hearing that as well. Well, thank you, Stephanie. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you so much for joining me on Coach's Session. Is there anything you'd like to ask or plug or promote before we end here?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me and giving me a little bit of time on your platform. And if you're watching this and you're like, hey, I like that girl, hit me up. Let's see what we can do.
Of course. Well, yes. Well, thank you guys. If you want to reach out to Miss Stephanie Tellis, you can also reach her at her website or send her an email at the email that she mentioned earlier. Thank you guys for another awesome episode of Coach's Sessions, and I will see you next time.